All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to see you this morning. First shift is alive and well here today. And my wife is back with us this morning. She's over her binge, so, she didn't even hear that. She's focused talking work. So, but it is good seeing y'all. We're supposed to have some groceries coming in. Hopefully they will. But things change, and I have not heard any difference, so But it is good seeing you this morning. And Amanda, if you want to give us just an update. I know everybody was concerned about what happened last week, and everybody you may have already shared with many of them, but just to give them a thumbnail of what happened.
My dad's seizure was caused by tumors on his brain, and he has several pea-sized tumors on his brain, and when they did more scans, they said that he has stage 4 kidney cancer. He has a tumor on his left kidney, and he has a couple spots on his lung, and that has spread, and so he's doing whole brain radiation, 25 treatments, and he meets with a different oncologist on Wednesday to determine the treatment for his kidney.
Yeah. So that precipitated the call of the seizure was the crisis, the emergency last week that.
But had he not had a seizure, we would have never known that he had no symptoms.
Yeah. So, as we think, and we will talk a lot in Ruth about providence. That could very well have been a providence.
Yeah.
It would sound like, oh my goodness, but at least it was providential that now you know what is actually going on. So, just another example of some of the providences that God brings and allows to come into our lives. But we certainly, as a class, want to remember your family, and if there's anything that we, as a class, can do for you, please don't hesitate to let us know. Let someone know, they can let me know, or whatever it is, and as you go through this. So, continuing with our study of the book of Ruth, we've looked at the basic situation of the family in the first 6 verses of chapter 1. And beginning in verse 7, we have the introduction or not so much an introduction, but the presentation of 3 particular people. And predominantly, the predominant person is is Naomi in this passage. I'm not going to read all 22 verses at one time. We'll kind of go through it as we go through it. But just beginning with verse 7 and reading through verse 10. And reads in the New International Version. With her 2 daughters, now she had gotten news that the Lord had brought food for his people in Bethlehem of Judah, so they are now returning. And she is returning home with her 2 daughters-in-law. She left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." Now, as I've mentioned, this section really looks at 3 primary people: Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth. And the standout person in this passage is Naomi. And we'll kind of look and focus on Naomi. Now, verse 7 tells us that Naomi left the place where she'd been living to set out to go back to the land of Judah. And it would be easy to think that this was a happy and encouraging time for Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth. But the passage, even though there are some verses out of this passage that are used in marriage ceremonies and are used to express the depth of love, as you read this section of Scripture from Naomi's standpoint, this whole scenario is depressed. And the focus upon Naomi in this passage causes one to wonder, why is she so morbid? I mean, she's telling them in verse 7 and 8, go back. Go back to your mother. Go back to your family. Maybe find rest in whatever husband you can find in Moab. And they said they'd go with it. Then she tells them again, you need to go back to your gods. You need to go back to your people. You need to, I ain't got nothing for you. And as you go through this passage, and then it ends up in verse 21, 20 and 21, she's telling them, don't even call me by my name anymore. Call me something else. Call me Mara, which is a word which means bitterness or bitter. And, as you read through the passage, you're left wondering, why in the world is this woman so morbid? She's going back to Judah, to Israel. Shouldn't she be happy? But I think the key to understanding this whole passage, and really some of the approach of Naomi later on in the little book, lies in verses 19 through 21. I want to read these, because we're going to kind of start and focus on these three verses and work our way back, because I think it helps us to understand where the passage goes. So let's look at that, verse 19. So the two women went on, this is Ruth and Naomi, until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So, these three verses, 19, 20, 21, help explain the whole of this section, verses 7 through 22. And evidently the family of Elimelech, even though just an average family, for all we know, was known to the residents of Bethlehem. Now, Bethlehem wasn't a sprawling city. It was just a little village. It was a nowhere town. But even after 10 years, they knew when Naomi had come back. And there had probably been correspondence between Naomi and Elimelech and his relatives and family in Bethlehem. There probably had been some correspondence, but travel back and forth may have been rather difficult. It was at least 100 miles going by way of Jericho, which would have been the probable route they would have gone to go to Moab. And even though 100 miles to us today is nothing, then it would have been at least a couple of day journey through maybe hostile territory. So even though correspondence may have occurred, probably visitation had not. And so as Naomi and Ruth, arrived back in Bethlehem, the town, remembering how they left, are at least surprised. The town was stirred. There was a buzz in the town. And the question was, can this be Naomi? And Naomi gives an answer that defines this entire section. As she says, don't call me Naomi, which means the pleasant one. Call me Mara, which means to be bitter. Because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord brought me back empty. The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. And I've titled this section, Wounded Believers. Because this is what it seems like Naomi is as she is returning home. And this section gives to us some insights into the nature of being a believer, but being wounded through the events and circumstances and issues of life. And Naomi is an example of where many believers have been and are in their spiritual lives. Faith hanging by a thread. And it's easier to point to the hurt and loss than even begin to see anything any different. And I think for us today, as we look at Naomi through this passage, there are some things that define the thinking that she had. Verse 19 through 21 defines her thinking. Verse 7 through 20 give to us some of the behaviors that are displayed when you are wounded. And you may feel that way this morning. You may be in the class, you may be a part of our discussion, and you know, there's days this past week your faith was hanging by a thread. And you could have much easier talked all day about all that was happening to you rather than being able to talk about seeing a bright future in that particular situation. And this gives to us, I think, some strength. It gives to us, you know, one, some commiseration. If you feel that way, Naomi felt that way too. So you're not alone in that. But also there's some teaching and some instruction for us. So we're going to kind of look at this section in reverse order. We're going to look at 19 through 21 and then go back through 7 through 22 altogether. Now, let's be clear. Naomi was certainly a believer. She wasn't lost. She was a believer. We can question the depth of her faith, but she clearly didn't accept the worship of the idols in Moab. So one of the first things I think we can understand from this passage is that sorrow in life doesn't equal being without hope. Defeated faith isn't faithlessness. I want you to think about that, because there's times and there are people that you may encounter that says, well, if you don't, you know, if you can't trust God, then you must not have any relationship with Jesus Christ. You're lost. That's what your problem is. You need to get saved. As if you needed to hear that on top of everything else that's going on. But I think Naomi gives us a clear message that you can be wounded. You can have weak, defeated faith. Could have even gone through times of that. But that doesn't mean that you were faithless. Elijah is another example of this. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 3 through 18, Elijah's just come off the Mount Carmel experience. I mean, you know, if there's anyone who's ever been on a mountain, Elijah was on a mountaintop experience. Then Jezebel says, fine. By tomorrow this time, you're going to be as dead as those 450 prophets. Now, you would think Elijah would have just said, I just defeated 450 prophets, called rain to come down, and all this other stuff. I am in control. But instead, he runs like a scared rabbit. And as he is running, he stops, and he is awakened, and the angel asks him, why are you here? He said, because Jezebel said she's going to kill me. I'm the only one left. There ain't nobody else around. And the Lord let him go to sleep, provided some food for him because he needed it. Let him sleep a little bit, sent him on his way down to Oreb, which was way south of where Carmel was. But there, Elijah had a defeated faith. Doesn't mean he was faithless, but his faith was defeated. Peter demonstrated this. Matthew chapter 14, verse 27 through 31. Remember, that's where the Lord came walking on the seas, and they saw him, and they all thought he was a ghost and everything. They were all crying out, and he said, no, it's me. And Peter said, well, if it's you, Lord, you let me walk on the water and come to you. And he said, well, come on. Step out, make it. And Peter steps out of the boat, actually is walking on the water until he started looking at the wind and the waves and all this, and his faith got weak, defeated, and he began to sink. And he cried out, and the Lord grabbed him and brought him back up. Not that he was faithless. I mean, he got out of the boat and started walking on the water. Any of us willing to step out of the boat on Lake Norman and try to walk across it? No. We'd have to really know the Lord told us to do that. You know what I'm saying? He knew. He believed that Jesus said it so he could do it. So he wasn't without faith. But his faith was weak and he got defeated pretty easily. I mean, that's the first time in his life he'd ever walked on water. Probably the last time in his life he ever walked on water. So, his faith got defeated. Paul talked about this. He echoes this sentiment in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13. When he talks about people passing away, he says, we do not grieve like the rest of man or men who have no hope. And I'm going to pick on Amanda for just a moment. She left last Sunday, tearful, crying, upset, obviously. Rightly so. But in all of this, she does not have to grieve as those who do not have a Savior. She has someone she can lean on to find strength and help and hope for the inner person. That's Jesus Christ. The lost do not have that. And we may have a weak faith in things that we've gone through. But it doesn't mean we have no faith simply because you're wounded. Now, I wanted to take the moments to lecture on that. But if I can read body language, I think I'm hitting some nerves. Real life happening. Any questions or comments or yeah, that makes sense, or no, I had no idea. I've never heard this out of Ruth before in my life. I don't know.
But I think something really, really bad happens. I think you can also be angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's happened to me, and I think the Lord is patient and brings us back
Mm-hmm. Yeah, keep going.
if we want to be. But I don't think He turns His back on us if we're angry over something.
If we're His child, He never ever.
No. We turn ours on Him,
No matter what we.
but He doesn't turn
Yeah.
on us. Yeah. And I think that, what you're saying really, what makes a wounded believer? What makes us right now, or what could make us? You may be feeling this morning, no, I'm strong, I'm good. I've been through a lot in my life, and no, I don't think I would be a Naomi. And we're going to talk about the Naomi complex, or the Naomi syndrome, or the Naomi disorder. I don't know which is the politically correct term to use anymore on those, but we're going to talk about that complex. And well, let's go into it right now. The Naomi complex. What was her thinking that made her a wounded believer? And she was angry. God is against me. Look at what she says. The Almighty. And this is the El Shaddai. This is the word that people use when we talk about, we want to praise God, being the power of God everywhere and everything. And it actually means, from translated from the Hebrew into the Greek, the Almighty means He whose hand touches everything. That's what that word means. And Naomi says, the Almighty has made my life bitter. The Lord has afflicted me, has brought misfortune on me. God is the overseer of all care and judgment, and He has made me the target of all of His arrows of misfortune. That's what she was thinking. God is against me. My husband's dead. My boys are dead. I got a couple of daughters-in-law that don't have any youngins, so ain't nobody taking care of me. God's against me. You ever felt that way? You ever said that? No, none of us, being good Baptists that we are, will ever confess that, God's against me, God don't like me, God don't love me, I have to eat worms, that type of feeling.
Just you, really. Just you.
Just me? Yeah, I've been there and said that, yeah.
Sometimes I think it's just this absolute disappointment, which leads to anger, that He didn't answer a prayer. I'm sure she prayed for her husband.
Probably, yeah.
And, you believe that if you love the Lord, and He's going to take care of you, He's going to answer your prayers. And then when it doesn't happen, I think you
Yeah, because we are thinking, why doesn't God make me happy in this world? I am a child of the King. Remember we sing the song, I'm a child of the King. We have these gospel songs that talk about how God is a friend of mine and all this other stuff. Well, if I'm all that to God, why doesn't he make me happy in this world?
And I think Satan puts that doubt in our mind too to lure us into that
Yeah.
feeling of no good or not doing enough.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Billy, what I think though is sad. I think when I hear about these young people, 10, 12, 14 years old that have committed suicide, I wonder, you know, a lot of times where their thought process is. Are they at the end of their road? Have they had an experience with the Lord?
Yeah.
Or has anybody ever talked to them about something like that, you know? Because I'm thinking, man, you know, when I was 10, 12, 14 years old, I wasn't thinking nothing about suicide, you know? And I know this is a different time and a different era, and I know there's a lot more peer pressure out there, a lot more social media, a lot more bashing, harassing, whatever. I mean, I got abused by my brothers and sisters and cousins, you know, but maybe it ain't the same thing as this day and time, you know. But I think about those things, and I think, what is their mind? Wonder what their mindset is, that it's so bad at 12 or 14 years old that you want to go and do something that's taking your own life. You know?
And I think you bring up a good point. I think, and it goes back to what we talked about in the earlier part. When you have and we'll call it a society. Now, you can define society anywhere from as small as a family unit to a nation, you know. But when you have a society that has lost its moral foundation, as living in the days of the judges, when everybody did that which was right in their own eyes, which is Judges 17 and other chapters. When they've lost their moral foundation, there isn't that teaching. There isn't that instilling that there is a God in heaven, that there is a life that you can have with him. It's, well, we're just as much an animal as any other animal is, and you know, we're just as much a dog as a monkey, and as much as a monkey as a fish. We're all of this. And for a kid to feel like if they are in a bad situation, their parents are maybe strung out, maybe there's a lot of domestic violence going on, maybe there's all of these things happening. This is the best my life is, because they haven't heard of anything else. And if this is the best my life is going to be, if this is what I've got to look forward to, for some young people, I'm clocking out.
Yeah, well, I thought about when he said that, kind of odd, but well, maybe you're chained to the front porch with a dead chicken around your neck.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Make me want to check out.
And already a foster kid, already lost your family, and now the people who are supposed to be taking care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody.
Well, I think that is what's hard to understand what Brad is talking about is that sense of hopelessness. Now, okay, it's bad,
Mm-hmm.
but you have absolutely no hope that it can ever be better. You think about that's where Naomi was.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, it's bad, and to have that sense that God can't intervene,
Yeah.
won't intervene, that it's never going to be any better than it is right now. I think that's why I have a hard time understanding, you know, the situation with young suicide. That, you know, you're 12 years old, you're 14 years old. Look at the life you have ahead of you, and to be so despondent, depressed, whatever, that you have absolutely no hope that it's going to be better.
And I think, especially for young people, they don't see. You know, we spend a lot of time as parents trying to get our kids to look beyond the end of their nose. You know, think about your education. You need to go to school. You need to learn something so you can get a good job and you can, you know, da-da-da. Well, my classmate don't like me. You know, that's you know, they're not thinking about that. And that's just normal with all young people, I guess. It was with all of us, you know. But when you don't have that teaching that instills that there is something different, there is something better. I'm not seeing any example of it. But there is something better, and I can choose to go after that. When I was working with kids in school, I was telling kids in kindergarten, you don't have to be what you grew up in and live in every day. You can choose to be different. Kindergartners, I was having to tell this. Because there was a kindergartner that chewed a hole in the wrist of the teacher assistant. I saw it was this big where he gnawed her. That was my kid I was working with. So much for the success that I had. I mean, but working with him, that was one of the things I helped him because he grew up in a terribly violent situation. And all he knew, if you don't like something, tear it up. That's how he survived. And when he's in a place to where everybody's doing something different, he don't know that. He hadn't lived there before. And helping him to understand you can be different. You don't have to be. And a lot of people don't have that. They don't have that foundation that is given them that yes, everything that you see says your life is crap. But at the same time, if you decide to wipe it up, using the real crass terms that follow along with that, you can wipe it up and be different. There were some decisions that I made as a teenager. Mid-teens, 14, 15, 16, right in that. There were some decisions I made, I ain't going to do this. When I get grown, I ain't doing this. And I realized I could have something different. There was some foundation. I didn't see a lot of it in example, but I knew that there was something else better. And I made a decision. I'm going to be different in those areas. And that doesn't mean I didn't have some problems in some other areas. But there were some things that I had seen that I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be different. But what makes a wounded believer is that thinking that God is against me. And if as a young person you don't think God's for you, I mean, you're in a pretty bad place. If God can't help you, who can?
But some of them don't even know God.
Yeah.
So they have no clue.
Loss of moral foundation. Yeah.
And just like this, I was thinking, every story's got two sides to it. So while Ruth's yakking about how bad God is, you just kind of think God might be saying, Ruth, what have you done
Or
for me
Naomi.
lately? Or Naomi, what have you done? What have you done?
Yeah. Because part of this, what makes a wounded believer, the thinking of God is against me. Okay, I'm just writing that out. For that hieroglyphic, that's God is against me. And part of it could be, well, you made the decision to go to Moab. You'd made, some of the things that happen to us in life are because we did make the wrong decision. And there are some people who would say, Elimelech should have stayed in Judah, they should have stayed home, they shouldn't have gone out, they should have toughed it out, they should have tried to create a revival in Bethlehem, and that's what you get when you don't obey God. Well, that could be true. Won't say it couldn't be. But at the same time, there are situations that we can't point to a failure. We can't see it. We search our hearts and minds and, Lord, what did I do? And we can't see it. But we do see that God allowed them. We know that. And as a believer who is experiencing that, we can't figure out, I didn't do anything, but God's allowed this. He's brought this on me. You begin to, and with Satan's help, you begin to have a problem trying to separate judgment from providence. It all looks the same. God's against me is how it feels. And along with this, Naomi said, Nothing can change my future. This goes back to some of the things we've already stated, speaking of young people. But this is what Naomi was looking at as well. The Lord has brought me back empty, is her statement. I went out full, but the Lord brought me back empty. In other words, in my immediate circumstances, and I'm assuming then that God either will not or he cannot do anything about it, so I will remain empty. That's what she was saying here. God brought me back empty. So God can't make you full again? No, evidently not.
Some of those things that happened to her, they couldn't be changed.
No.
She lost her husband, she lost her son. And so, I think in that case, it becomes a matter of trusting the Lord to bring something good out of something really bad, because you can't change her circumstance.
Yeah, circumstances can't change. What she saw was, the Lord brought me back empty. The implication being, and I'm going to stay empty. Nothing will ever change. I'm empty. Yeah, my husband's gone, can't change that. My boys are gone, can't change that. So I'm just going to stay empty. And that leads to another area that she had a problem with, was being able to see the blessing. And we'll talk about that some more.
And we all do that. We're all women. You know, we've all women. If I wake up tomorrow, my two children, my husband are dead, I'm not going to tell you all this thing how to do it. I know I'm
She'll miss
supposed
the
to.
kids.
Yeah. Yeah. She'll be hunting the insurance policy. You know. Oh my. Mm-mm.
But I mean, we're going to wallow in it.
Yeah.
And that's when we need our Christ family.
Yeah.
Because we're going to wallow in it. We can't help it. We're human. We're going to wallow in it.
Yeah. And Naomi rejected that. When she came to Bethlehem, and they all came out and said, what in the world happened to you, Naomi? Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. She was just pushing, I'm empty. God's done this to me. God ain't going to change anything. I am defeated.
But I think she was like I've been a lot of times in my life. He didn't answer my prayers like I wanted him answered.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there are unanswered prayers. He hears them all.
Yeah.
You get yes, you get no, you get maybe, you get wait. And sometimes we're not happy with that.
Right.
And a lot of times people think it's a genie in a bottle.
Yeah.
You ask and you get it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not like that.
True. Very true. It's like if you have faith, you can move mountains. But you've probably heard the saying that goes along with, well, that depends on whether there's a little widow on the other side of that mountain. God may not move the mountain right now because there's somebody else that needs to be helped. And if I go tearing that mountain up and throwing it in the ocean, I'm going to hurt somebody else. But we don't see that, We don't. We say, God don't like me. He didn't answer my prayer.
I think it shows, too, that there was a Joel Osteen back in those days as well. Helping well.
Yes.
Like it.
Yeah.
Because,
You always
it's all
got
about
it.
me.
Yeah.
It was all about me. So, even in Naomi's day, there was that type of, I think, speaking as well. Well, if I'm not getting my way, then something's wrong.
That's why they're so popular, because
Yeah.
we want that type of
Right.
agreement with us.
Still do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Naomi said, I am bitter. Call me Mara. The thinking of a wounded believer is that of bitterness. Maybe not necessarily at God, but at life from his hand. He didn't answer my prayer. He didn't answer the prayer like I wanted him to. Why didn't he make me happy? I'm a daughter of the king. I'm a man of the king. I'm a child of God. Why doesn't he make me happy?
And I think, but if you're a Christian, you know he could.
Yeah.
Because he can do anything.
Yeah.
And that's the part that makes it so hard to understand sometimes. Because I know you could have answered that prayer, but you didn't.
And I think that's part of it. And, here I am. I'm, one step from heresy here. But here is where I think we have not helped ourselves as believers. We have hammered on this. All things are possible with God. God can do anything. Yes, he can. However, all of that is subjected to his will and to what he knows about our future in his plan. And we can't understand that. We don't understand that. But we get hung up, he told Mary, with God all things are possible. Yeah. He raised the dead, for crying out loud. Can't he take care of me?
Well, with society today, we can get anything pretty much at the snap of the fingers,
And we think God will do the same thing.
We're programmed to think, patient, all right, I'll be patient for 24 hours. You better be here after that, by God.
Okay, Lord, you're on the clock.
Right.
Yeah. I think so that, from Naomi's point of view, she felt like her family didn't do anything to deserve the experiences they had. Hurt, confusion, and the inability to see beyond the past can and does put one in a place of anger and just at a loss to see how the relationship with God from that point. It's just blank. They can't see it. Their past, what has happened to them is so strong that they're constantly looking this way, walking forward. I can't see anything better out here because this is where they're looking.
Then you got somebody like Job that handles it 180. I mean, if she would have handled that like Job, had the faith of Job, what a witness that would have been.
Yeah.
Same thing with us.
Yeah.
I mean, hate a lukewarm Christian, but most of us are not even quite lukewarm.
Yeah.
So where do we have any right asking for anything or complaining because we didn't get anything? We haven't done what we're supposed to do anyway.
Yeah, I keep remembering the words of Jesus, and I can't recall the passage in the Gospels, where it says, after you have done everything that you ought to do, you've only done the minimum. He says, still say that you're an unprofitable servant because you haven't added anything. You've just done the minimum of what you're supposed to do if you do everything that God wants you to do. You still ain't done nothing but the minimum. You ain't done jack. You've only done what you're supposed to do. And, we look at that and think, fine. What a wonderful God you are. But we don't realize what he's doing and working and planning in us, through us, around us, in spite of us, all over us, all of these things, to bring about a greater good for his glory. That's the theme. His will, not ours. His. And when we think about the Naomi complex, we can look at some behaviors that she displayed that we have displayed in our lives. And we've referred to a couple of them, and I'm going to go back and review a couple of them. Verses 8 through 13. Naomi saying, go home. I can't do anything for you. And that behavior, when she says, I go home, I can't do anything for you, she defined her situation by herself and the society around her. Verses 11 through 13. Because she said, listen, if I was to have a husband tonight and give birth to children right now, you going to wait 20 years to be able to marry? No. There ain't nothing I can do for you. In that day, for a woman, it was marriage and children that was perceived to define blessing and success. As a wounded believer, Naomi allowed her perception of the situation and what others' perception of a situation define what was possible. I am empty, remember? I can't do anything for you. Focusing on herself and what society would look at and say. And we do the same when we're wounded. Life as we see it defines what God can do and what we will be able to have and do in our future. Once again, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara called me bitter. God has brought me back empty. There isn't any future for me, and consequently, there isn't any future for you, Orpah and Ruth. You need to go ahead and split. Remember I said last week that she determined to defeat their coming to the Lord? Here's an example. 2 times. Go home. Go home to your gods, she actually says. Go home to your gods. And the next behavior was a neglect of witness. When we get defeated, one of the last things we're going to do is witness somebody. Well, I don't feel like praising God, so I don't care whether you go to hell or not. We don't say it, but we have show felt it. And we don't share. Naomi is going back to a land of promise where the law and the knowledge of Jehovah can be found and experienced, but she can't see it as beneficial to her daughters-in-law because she is so focused on her own hurt. How many people have we discouraged from coming closer to God because we hurt so much from our experiences? How many people have I discouraged because instead of being like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego coming out of the fire without even the smell of fire on them, I've come out of the fire smelling like a lump of charcoal.
And you didn't have to say a word, just your attitude
yeah.
of what they seen in you.
Yeah, and like they start singing Billy Joel, I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints, you know.
Yep.
And I'm not giving them any help. I'm giving them all the ammunition they need. We focus coming to God, His church, and His land from our standpoint. I can't really do anything for you, and we leave God out of it. Because, again, we're bitter at Him or the life He has permitted for us. And when we're like this, I've been like this, so I'm not talking at you. I'm saying, dude, me and Naomi can sit down and have a pretty good conversation in verses 7 through 22. We just drain the life, even of another Christian. You ever been around a Christian and when you left them, you felt like, dude, mercy. If I hear anything else bad, you know, that's a Naomi. That's a wounded believer suffering from one of these 3 elements of Naomi complex syndrome or disorder. Whichever proper term you want to tack to that psychologically. But this is some of the behaviors. When you see this, this is what you're seeing. If you know the person is a believer. But instead of a smile on their face, they're looking at you like that all the time. You can just go up to them and say, you got a Billy complex. And they look at you, what? Same thing, just change the name. Just refer them to Ruth chapter 1, verses 7 through 22. So that explains what I'm talking about. Yeah.
They're going to talk to you next.
Yeah. They're going to look at you like, what? Yeah. Another behavior is a discouragement to dedication. Now, Naomi told her daughters-in-law, may God bless you in whatever you want to do. That's what she said. And this sounds like on the face of it a good thing. But she's also telling them to go back to their home and to their gods, verse 15. Decide your future as you will, and may God bless you. Implying, unlike He has me. Because remember, God's made my life miserable. I'm empty, and it's His fault. When we are facing times of Elimelech, Naomi, the family, we need to ask ourselves the question, what are you running or going or coming to? Are we coming to God in this situation, or are we coming to the gods of this world? Still a believer, but, We're lost. We're just, you know, we're at the point of just kind of, we're just meandering around. That's, you know, that's where we are. Where are you going? What do you mean, Naomi? What do you, isn't there a God in Israel? Well, yeah, there is, but he sure doesn't like me. Okay, great. You know, once again, that testimony thing. She was in denial, and I'm going to have to hurry. She was in denial of fellowship. Just like what we talked about earlier. She said, don't call me Naomi. God doesn't love me. And I'm holding my life against him. Have you ever heard anybody say, I'm mad at God? There you go. Yeah. I'm holding my life against him. We reflect our judgment on God and his wisdom. We hurt, we don't understand it, and we can't understand how A equals B. And we are saying, in effect, if you love me, prove it. Now, he's already shown us his love by Calvary. But we forget that, remember? Because I'm hurting right now. Why don't you prove it? I forgave you of every sin. I forgave you of the bitterness you have right now. I'm going to carry you to heaven in spite of your cantankerous, ornery self. And you're telling me I haven't done anything for you? I mean, it'd be nice if he would actually speak that to us. You know, we might listen a little bit better. But he has spoken it. It's right here in a more sure word of prophecy. But I'm going to wrap this up. Now, I know it's a little after quarter after, but just bear with me. We'll come back to it again next week. She had a blindness to blessing, verses 14 through 18. Ruth, in light of all of Naomi's concentrated effort at discouraging her faith, said, don't tell me to leave you. Don't tell me to leave you. I am coming to your God and to your country. And by the way, I'm following you as I do it. And the passage says that she stopped urging her. And this is one of the greatest failures of a person who is wounded. They can't see the hand of God nor believe there's a good future. Remember, he brought me back empty. You almost get the feeling that Naomi's response to Ruth's pledge and curse. She said, you know, may God deal with me ever so severely if anything but death separates us. You kind of get the feeling that Naomi was saying, well, if you want to be miserable with me, go ahead. You can't fix stupid, you know. And Ruth was a Moabitess. You know, the cards were stacked against her. And Naomi couldn't give her a husband. And Naomi was bitter. But here was the blindness. In all of these things that have happened, God has never been stopped by any set of circumstances. She was blind to that. He brought me back empty. God has never been stopped. God had provided Naomi with Ruth, who was dedicated to her more than Naomi was to Ruth. And this was a providence of promise, but Naomi couldn't see it. What is it that we may be missing through our life experiences that God has provided for our good? And if God is El Shaddai, if he is Almighty, he's still in control and can act. And that as the Almighty, his plan may be very different, and his foreknowledge was working to ensure that he would make Naomi full. He made her eat those words. He brought me back empty. She had to eat that crow down to the feathers and feet because she became full in spite of what she was thinking. And we're going to talk about this idea of how God was working in and through that. We're going to spend, it goes all the way through the book, but we're going to spend some good time on it in the next sections. Okay, thank you. Got to let you go.